Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're opening up a topic that, I'll be honest, it usually triggers a very specific reflex in most people.
Yeah, it's a heavy one for sure.
It is. But it's crucial we talk about it. It's one of those subjects where your brain kind of thinks it knows the answer before the question is even fully asked.
Right.
So let's actually start with a little experiment for you listening. If I say the phrase religious extremism or religious violence, and I ask you to just close your eyes and picture a news report about it, like, be honest, where does your mind automatically go? What part of the world is on that map?
I mean, for the vast majority of people living in the West, and honestly, anyone who's been consuming mainstream media for the last, 25 years?
Yeah, at least.
The default setting is just the Middle East. It's Islam.
Exactly. It's almost muscle memory at this point.
Yeah.
You hear the word extremism, and you immediately picture a very specific geography and a very specific theology. But today, we're really going to challenge that reflex. We are unpacking a really provocative article from Fellowship magazine, and it's by James Zogby.
Yeah.
And the title basically gives away the ending right up front. It's called "The Abuse of Religion to Foster Extremism is a Universal Phenomenon."
It's a really strong title. But the argument underneath it is, I think, even stronger. Zogby is essentially arguing that extremism it's not a bug that's unique to one specific faith.
Right.
It's actually a feature, or really a manipulation, that pops up in every single major religious tradition.
And before we get into the heavy stuff, we should probably establish why we're listening to James Zogby on this. Like, is he just some pundit offering an opinion?
No, not at all. He's got serious academic and practical weight behind him. He actually holds a PhD in comparative religions.
Okay, so he knows his stuff.
Very much so. He's the founder of the Arab American Institute, but more importantly for this specific discussion, he spent decades studying the Abrahamic faiths right alongside the religions of India. So when he talks about these universal patterns across different cultures, he is not just guessing. He's looking at the raw data.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to basically shift our focus. Zogby wants us to stop obsessing over who is doing the praying and start looking at the sociological patterns of how religion actually gets weaponized.
Exactly. Because if you zoom out, the mechanics of how you turn a regular believer into an extremist, they look suspiciously similar, whether you're in a temple, a mosque, a synagogue, or a church.
That is the key right there.
Yeah.
It's about moving past the theology and looking at the human behavior. And Zogby actually starts the article with a story that perfectly illustrates how bad we are at this.
Oh, yeah, the Pamel story.
Right, how blind we are to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Do you want to break down that panel discussion he moderated?
Sure. So picture this setup. Zogby is brought in to moderate a panel titled "Using Religion to Justify Violence."
Which is a very broad title.
Incredibly broad. You'd expect a wide-ranging discussion about history, sociology, maybe some psychology. But the panelists, and these were high-level former government officials, big-time media analysts, they had complete tunnel vision. They only wanted to talk about Islam.
So they were stuck in that exact default setting we just talked about.
Completely stuck. They couldn't see past the daily headlines. And Zogby tries to snap them out of it. He tries to widen the aperture a bit. He starts throwing other examples at them just to spark a real debate. So he brings up George W. Bush.
Oh, right. Because Bush famously said he felt he was carrying out God's will regarding the war in Iraq.
Right.
Which is a very clear example of a religious justification for state violence.
Right.
Regardless of your politics on the war, that's what that is.
Exactly. So Zogby puts that on the table. Then he brings up white Christian militias operating right here in the U.S. He asks about biblical prophecies being used to justify land conquest in Israel.
So he's really giving them a full buffet of examples from totally different faiths.
Yeah, a real spread. And how do you think these experts reacted? Did they engage with the premise?
I'm guessing no.
No, and this is the scary part. Zogby says they actually treated his questions as an annoying distraction.
Wow.
They were so locked into the narrative that extremism just equals Islam that they physically couldn't process examples from their own backyards. It was just cognitive dissonance happening in real time.
That's concerning. If the people who are running the government and analyzing the news for us can't see the pattern, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
It means we're treating a global virus like it's just a local infection.
Which is exactly why Zogby wrote this piece. He says we have to take a sort of world tour of extremism to prove that this really is happening everywhere. We have to look at the evidence.
Okay, let's take that tour then.
Yeah.
We're going to look at 4 major religions, starting with a stop that I think acts as a real wake-up call for Western listeners, India.
Right. Now, in the West, we often have a very romanticized view of Eastern religion.
Oh, definitely. We think yoga, we think inner peace.
Eat, pray, love.
Exactly.
But Zogby points us directly to the rise of the Bharatiya Janata Party, or the BJP, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
And just to be clear for you listening, we're not talking about a fringe group hiding out in the mountains. This is the government of the largest democracy in the world.
Precisely. Zogby notes that Modi actually rode to power on a massive wave of extreme Hindu nationalism.
Right.
It's this potent fusion of religious identity and raw political power. And Zogby drops a fact in the article that a lot of people have either forgotten or maybe they just never knew. Modi was actually banned from entering the United States for years.
Wait, a sitting head of state was banned from the U.S.?
Well, before he was prime minister, yes. The U.S. revoked his visa because of his alleged role in either looking the other way or even actively encouraging anti-Muslim riots in his home state of Gujarat.
Oh, wow.
Riots that killed over 1,000 people.
So we are talking about state-sanctioned violence based entirely on religious identity.
Yes. The argument from the extremists there is that India is fundamentally a Hindu nation. And other faiths, specifically Muslims and Christians, they're viewed as secondary or just completely unwelcome. It's classic exclusionism, but it's wrapped in this heavy religious rhetoric.
Okay, so that's India. Let's move to the next stop on this tour. And honestly, this is the one that shocked me the most. Sri Lanka.
Buddhism.
Yes.
Huh.
Buddhism. I mean, come on. When I think of Buddhism, I'm thinking of meditation, mindfulness, the Dalai Lama.
Sure.
I absolutely do not think of armed militias. It feels like an oxymoron to even say it out loud.
That's the brand in the West, though. We've totally sanitized it. But the reality on the ground in places like Sri Lanka and Myanmar, too, although Zogby focuses heavily on Sri Lanka here, is very different.
Right.
He highlights the existence of incredibly violent Buddhist militias. These are organized groups that have literally sworn to wipe out what they call the Muslim threat to their island.
That just sounds incredibly aggressive for a religion that is famously based on compassion and nonviolence. How do they justify that in their own heads? Is there some specific text they quote?
It's territorial, and this is a really vital insight from Zogby. They complain that Muslims are occupying Buddhist lands.
Buddhist lands? Okay, so it's not just about souls, it's about soil.
Exactly. And we're going to see this specific theme keep popping up everywhere. The idea isn't just about theology, it's about real estate.
Right.
The belief that the land itself belongs to one specific faith by divine right, and anyone else living there is an intruder. The religion basically becomes a deed to the property.
So we have Hindu nationalism in India, we've got Buddhist militias in Sri Lanka. Let's move to the Middle East now.
Yep.
But we aren't talking about Islam yet. Let's talk about Israel.
Right. Zogby addresses extreme Jewish nationalism in the article. He points to specific factions like Gush Eminim, which in English translates to the Band of the Faithful.
Which sounds almost like a respectable civic group, but I assume their ideology is quite a bit more intense.
It is. Their main focus is the settlement of the West Bank. But Zogby points out that for them, this isn't just a political argument about security or drawing borders. It is deeply theological. And this is where it gets really dark. Zogby cites prominent rabbis within this movement who have argued that the commandment, thou shalt not kill, actually has an asterisk next to it.
An asterisk on one of the 10 Commandments. I mean, that seems pretty clear-cut. There are no footnotes on stone tablets.
Not to them. They claim that commandment doesn't apply to Gentiles, non-Jews, because in their extreme view, the souls of Gentiles aren't human in the same way.
That is terrifying.
It is.
I mean, once you explicitly dehumanize someone through your theology, you can justify literally anything.
Exactly. It removes the entire moral barrier to violence. If the person standing on the land that you want isn't fully human in the eyes of God, then removing them isn't a sin.
Right.
It's just a chore. It becomes a religious duty to clear the land.
Okay, so we've been abroad. Let's bring this tour back home to the United States and look at Christianity. I feel like this is where listeners might get a little defensive. But Zogby argues we are absolutely not immune to this.
Not at all. And he gives a quick history lesson first, just to prove that it's not a new phenomenon here. He takes us back to the World Wars. Americans were proudly singing "Onward, Christian Soldiers" in their churches.
I actually remember singing that out of hymnals growing up. It's a very catchy tune.
It is, but think about the context back then. They were singing that while being taught that they were going overseas to kill godless Huns.
Wow.
It was a direct way to sanctify the war effort, to make the act of killing holy. But if we fast forward to the modern context, Zogby points to right-wing extremist groups today.
You mean the groups that are using Christian symbols at political rallies and protests?
Yes, he argues that these groups use Christian imagery, the cross, the Bible, Christian flags to validate racism, xenophobia, and misogyny.
Right.
And similar to what we saw in India with the BJP, this isn't just fringe groups playing soldier out in the woods anymore. Zogby explicitly points out that there are current members of Congress and political candidates who are openly embracing the label of Christian nationalism.
So if we look at the whole board, we have Hindu, Buddhist, Jewish, and Christian examples. The who constantly changes, but the behavior, the violence, the exclusion, the dehumanization, it feels hauntingly consistent.
That is the universal phenomenon. It's the exact same play being put on, just with different costumes.
Which naturally leads me to the biggest question. Why?
Right.
If these religions are all so fundamentally different, they have different holy books, entirely different prophets, completely different rituals, why does the extremism look so identical?
This is the very core of Zogby's argument, and it's the main insight I really want listeners to grasp today. To understand this, we have to make a hard distinction between faith and political ideology.
Okay, let's unpack that. Faith versus ideology. Because I think most people use those two words totally interchangeably in casual conversation.
They do, but Zogby says we shouldn't. By definition, faith implies a belief in the unknown. It's a journey. It requires a certain amount of humility because you're dealing with the divine, which is beyond total human comprehension. Ideally, true faith admits that we don't have all the answers. It's about trust, not absolute proof.
So faith inherently leaves room for mystery, for doubt even.
Exactly. But ideology, political ideology, is always certain.
Right.
It's about concrete goals, accumulating power, and absolute rights. Zogby calls the mixture of these two things a lethal brew.
A lethal brew.
Yes. When you take the highly evocative, emotional language of religion language that touches people's souls and their core identities, and you mix it with the absolute black and white certainty of a political ideology, religion completely stops being belief.
It changes completely.
It becomes abused. It becomes a weapon.
So the religion essentially becomes a tool. It's just a delivery mechanism for the politics.
Precisely. Zogby argues that extremists are essentially just plucking quotes. They will pull a single line from the Vedas, the Mosaic Law, the Quran, or the teachings of Jesus, and they'll use it to validate a political agenda that almost always contradicts the actual spirit of the religion itself.
It's the ultimate appeal to authority. You can't argue with me about my political stance on this border or this policy because God said so.
It stops debate instantly. And Zogby is very firm on this specific point. He says there is absolutely no justification in the evolved teachings of any of these religions for slaughtering innocents.
Yeah.
When a Sri Lankan militant says, this is Buddhist land, or a Jewish extremist says God promised this specific hill to us, they aren't actually practicing the core tenets of their faith. They are using the language of faith to validate a land grab.
That is such a helpful distinction because saying I want your land because I want to be rich is obviously a crime, but saying God wants me to have this land, well, that's a crusade.
Right. The religious language elevates the violence into something holy. It magically turns a selfish, greedy act into a selfless duty.
Right. It allows the perpetrator to feel like a righteous hero instead of just a common criminal.
So we know how they do it. They do it by mixing this rigid certainty with selective scripture. But we need to talk about the audience.
Yes.
Why does it work? Why do regular, everyday people fall for this? I mean, most people just want to live their lives, raise their kids in peace. Why follow a leader who preaches hatred and violence?
This is where Zogby makes a really sharp pivot to sociology. And this is crucial for us to grasp. We have to have some empathy here to understand the mechanism. It is rarely just about bad theology. It's about deep human vulnerability.
What kind of vulnerability are we talking about?
Loss of control. That is the big one. Zogby points to things like severe economic stress, intense political instability, or major social dislocation.
Like when the national economy crashes, or you lose your factory job, or your entire town just dries up economically.
Exactly that. Or rapid urbanization. Imagine your family's entire way of life changing completely in a single generation.
That's incredibly destabilizing. You feel totally unmoored, you feel alienated, you feel like you did everything right, you played by the rules, but you're still falling behind. Zogby describes individuals in this situation as easy prey.
Wow. Easy prey.
Yes. When you are drowning in uncertainty about your family's future, you are desperate for a lifeline. You are desperate for simple answers.
And I imagine That is exactly when the extremist leader steps in.
That's what Zogby calls the predator dynamic. The leader sees that raw fear and they exploit it. They don't offer complex, nuanced policy solutions because those are hard. They offer simple ones.
And I assume there's a playbook for how they reel these frightened people in.
There is, and Zogby outlines it beautifully. It's basically a two-step sales pitch. And
Yeah.
once you hear it, you will see it operating across every single culture we've discussed today.
Okay, lay it out for us. What is step one of the playbook?
Step one is establishing the golden age. It's the urgent call to return to the old ways. We often refer to this as fundamentalism. The leader stands up on a stage and says, look at this sinful present day. Look at how messy and confusing and poor everything is. We need to go back to the perfect past.
Ah, right, the good old days.
Yeah.
Which, historically speaking, usually weren't actually that good for most people.
Right.
But they feel incredibly safe in hindsight because they're familiar.
Exactly. It romanticizes a past that probably never existed in the first place.
Right.
But it offers a profound sense of order. It tells the guy who just lost his job, hey, it's not your fault the world changed. The world is wrong, and we can fix it by going backward together.
And step two?
Step two is creating the scapegoat. You have to identify the other, because you need someone tangible to blame for why we aren't living in that golden age anymore.
And who is the other in this scenario?
Well, it changes entirely based on the context. That's
Yeah.
the insidious thing. It's totally interchangeable. Sometimes it's a vulnerable minority group living right next door that people fear is gaining too much power. Sometimes it's an external enemy, like a foreign nation. And sometimes it's literally just lifestyle changes or a progressive social transformation that they can point a finger at.
So the pitch is, those people over there are the reason you lost your job. Those people are the reason your kids don't listen to you anymore.
Precisely. It demonizes a specific group to create a common enemy. Zogby notes that this two-step pattern holds true in the East, the West, the past, and the present. It provides this incredibly powerful false sense of security. It tells the follower, I know exactly why my life is hard now, and I know exactly who I need to fight to fix it.
It's frighteningly simple when you break it down like that.
Yeah.
You take a person who feels completely out of control of their own destiny, you give them a perfect mythical past to yearn for,
Yeah.
and an enemy to hate,
Yep.
and then you wrap that whole package up in the absolute authority of God.
And that right there is why Zogby insists we have to stop seeing this as a problem with just one religion. If we only look at Islam, or we only look at any single faith in isolation, we completely miss the mechanism. We allow the cancer to grow everywhere else because we falsely think we're immune to it.
It really reminds me of what he said toward the end of the article about discernment.
Yes, he says real discernment is in order now. We have to be able to separate the sacred text from the con artist holding it. We have to separate the genuine believer from the political manipulator.
So let's try to synthesize all of this for the listener. If you're walking away from this deep dive today, what is the one big takeaway you should carry with you?
The main takeaway is that extremism isn't actually about the specific holy book sitting on the shelf. It's about the deliberate abuse of that book to mask a very worldly political agenda.
Yeah.
And the warning is super clear. Limiting our criticism to only one faith while ignoring the actual root causes the economic despair, the social alienation that just allows the exact same problem to fester and mutate in our own backyards.
You can't kill a dangerous idea with a drone strike if the idea is fundamentally born out of social collapse.
Exactly. You have to address the underlying vulnerability that makes the extremist message sound so appealing in the first place. You have to fix that profound loss of control that Zogby talks about.
I really want to leave everyone listening with a final provocative thought.
Yeah.
Just something to chew on over the next few days based on Zogby's distinction between faith and certainty.
Go for it.
We talked heavily today about how faith is inherently about the unknown. It's about trusting in something you can't fully grasp or prove. And we established that extremism is about absolute, unshakable, rigid certainty.
Right.
So maybe the biggest red flag in any religious or political discussion isn't which scripture is being quoted at you. Maybe it's the attitude of the speaker themselves. Perhaps the exact moment someone claims to be 100% sure of God's political opinion, whether that's about a piece of land, a piece of legislation, or a war, that is the moment they have left true faith behind and entered into pure ideology.
That is a really powerful litmus test. True faith questions. Extremism commands.
Definitely something to think about the next time you're scrolling through the daily headlines. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.
See you next time.